the forgotten shadow. Elnay Lyson was an invisible girl. At school, no one noticed her presence. She walked through the hallways without anyone glancing at her, and even when she spoke, her voice seemed to vanish into thin air. Her classmates called her Elnay the Transparent, a nickname she never disputed because it was true. Her solitude was a habit, a silent weight she had carried for as long as she could remember. But that day, everything changed. As she wandered the streets after school, she came across an old woman sitting on a bench. The woman's piercing gaze seemed to read her like an open book. "You carry a hidden beauty within you, but it is buried beneath your shadow." Elnay shivered. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. If you want the world to see you differently, you must make a wish. Without thinking, Elna whispered, "I want to be seen. I want to shine." The old woman smiled, gently touched her forehead, and everything changed. The next morning, the reflection in the mirror seemed strange. Her face was the same, yet enhanced. Her hair shimmered with silky brilliance, her eyes looked deeper, and her smile appeared more captivating. At school, heads turned as she walked past. The students who had always ignored her now wanted to be near her. "Wow, Elna, have you always been this beautiful?" asked Clara, one of the most popular girls. "Do you want to come to my party tonight?" Elnay nodded, troubled. Finally, she existed. But with every forced smile, with every word spoken to please others, she felt something fading inside her. As if it wasn't really her who was laughing. Days passed and her popularity soared. People adored her, complimented her, envied her. But inside, Elna felt empty. She no longer spoke the way she used to, no longer laughed at what genuinely amused her. She was playing a role. Her old personality, her dreams, her deep thoughts, all seemed to be disappearing. One evening, after returning from a party, she looked at herself in the mirror. "Who are you?" she whispered to her reflection, but her reflection did not answer. In the shadow of the mirror, a paler, duller version of herself was watching her. The more Elnay shone in the eyes of others, the more she felt that something was wrong. She was admired, envied, desired, but was she happy? Her old interests no longer interested her. Her childhood memories faded. Every day, she drifted further away from the real Elnay. One night, she had a dream. She saw a version of herself, sitting in the dark. A Elnay with tired features and lifeless eyes. "It's you, the real Elnay, isn't it?" she asked. The figure nodded. "Why are you here?" "Because you locked me away." Elnay realized that the person she once was had not disappeared. She was simply trapped, hidden behind this perfect mask. But could she still set herself free? Every time she tried to be herself, the way people looked at her changed. They expected her to be funny, charming, perfect. She could no longer be quiet, dreamy, or melancholic. She was a prisoner of this image. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "I want to find myself again." But her reflection didn't move. The old Elnay was still trapped in the shadows. That's when she understood the truth. The wish hadn't made her a better person. It had simply erased her. She could continue to be this perfect Elna, loved but hollow. Or she could break the mask and become herself again at the risk of losing everything. Her reflection's eyes were sad but determined. Elnay took a deep breath, and she made her choice. Elnay stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. The old version of herself was there, hidden in the shadows, silent and invisible, just like before. But this time, Elnay refused to ignore her. She closed her eyes and remembered her past. The moments she spent drawing alone in her room, the books that made her dream, the songs that moved her. She thought about the little girl who talked to the stars, hoping someone would listen. Then she thought about the Elne of today. The perfect girl, admired but empty. A girl who laughed at jokes she didn't find funny, who painted a smile on her face to hide her emptiness. Elne opened her eyes and touched the mirror with her fingertips. I see you. The figure behind the glass looked at her, surprised. I'm sorry, Elne whispered. I abandoned you, but I want to find you again. A shiver ran down her spine. The mirror trembled. A dizziness overtook her. When she lifted her head, the figure had vanished. She was back. The next day, everything changed. At school, she no longer forced her smile. She didn't laugh at Clara's jokes. She didn't try to impress Ethan. She spoke less, observed more, listened to her own thoughts. Quickly, the way people looked at her changed. Elne, you're acting weird today. Are you mad? But she didn't answer the way they expected. The invitations decreased. The whispers began. Elne, the perfect was no longer perfect. One day, Claire raised an eyebrow and said, You've changed. Elne smiled softly. No, I'm just becoming myself again. And for the first time, she felt a weight lift. Slowly, she lost everything she had gained. Her popularity faded as quickly as it had appeared. The messages stopped. The invitations disappeared. People passed by her without looking, just like before, but this time she was no longer invisible to herself. She went back to doing what she loved, reading under the trees, drawing in her notebook, writing stories. She was no longer Elna the perfect. She was just Elna, and that was enough. One day, as she sat alone on a bench, a boy approached. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't someone popular. It was just a boy who seemed to see something real in her. Hi, he said softly. She looked up, intrigued. Hi, she replied. He didn't ask why she was alone. He didn't try to impress her. He simply sat beside her, took out a notebook, and started drawing. For a long time, no words were spoken. But for the first time in a long while, Elna felt like she was no longer in the shadows. She was here, truly here. And this time, that was enough.